All right, good evening or good afternoon if you're in the Pacific Northwest. My name is Ramon. This is Bold Like a Leopard. This is the Troll Tribune interview. Ironically, this isn't somebody that I met through social media, through an argument or through an interchange or whatever. This is somebody whose channel I've been following for about, I want to say 4 months, since May, when there was an event that, in my opinion, it shows the uh, conclusion of a long, I don't know if it's a conclusion, but it's certainly a milestone in a long process that's been happening on college campuses. So please welcome Benjamin Boyce from, you live in Washington State, right?
Yep, Olympia, Washington.
And please tell us about your project, Expose. Is it Expose or Exposing Evergreen?
It's Expose Evergreen, which is a
Okay.
play on the hashtag Expose Evergreen that the student protesters use to get out the word of their protests. And I just kind of stole that and put a little diacritic mark over the middle E. And what that is, what I've been doing briefly, after the protests happened, I signed a letter that was signed by 16 other students, and we're called the Evergreen 17. And that letter was in response to the protests and saying that we do not agree with this. We're here to learn. We're here for dialogue. We're here for free speech. We are totally standing against the witch hunt that's happened for at least one professor and possibly more. And after I signed that letter, certain faculty came up to me and staff came up to me and kind of started describing the situation from their viewpoint. And they described a situation where they could not speak, where there was a chill effect happening in communication and within an academic institution. I think that is absolutely absurd and very problematic. And then I looked at all the media attention that was being generated, and I didn't see anybody addressing the underlying issues that were going on, that what led to the protests and what the like the language that the protesters were using and how they were framing events and the narrative that they were operating within. And so I began to speak to that, to hopefully kind of move the dialogue away from this reactionary state of people just watching these videos and reacting to the reactionary behavior that was being proposed in the videos, and try to get a little deeper. One of the mottos of Evergreen for the last year was dig deep, right? So I started to dig deep. I started to apply my Evergreen education to the Evergreen protests. And that led me on a journey of just finding documents, finding videos of teachers teaching certain ideologies, and then I just started to comment on those ideologies, and hence this whole YouTube thing started going for me.
So before we get into politics and all of the material that you were getting into,
Yeah.
Let's remember that this is a school, and there are these are young adults and sometimes
Yeah.
I guess children that are there, people doing, let's say there's what do they call it, post-secondary option. I did it myself in high school at a community college.
Okay.
So I mean, I don't know how old you are, but how long have you been involved with Evergreen? Are you were a student there, or you were working there for a while? Exactly how long have you been associated with the college, and you're not anymore, right?
No, I graduated in June. So the events that
Congratulations.
happened. Well, thank you. We'll see what it means at this point, but and I began my college education at Evergreen in January or winter quarter of 2013. So it was about 4.5 years that I was there. And I do like that you bring up the fact that this is a school. And I think that when outsiders look at the videos that the students made of the student protests, we really need to understand that these are young people like going through a process of growth and going through a process of discovery. And I think one of the major critiques I have of Evergreen itself, the administration, the faculty, the staff, is that they didn't use that as a time to teach the students, or at least not publicly. maybe privately they had some discussions and stuff. So I do think we need to understand that these are largely people who their minds are still developing, as well as their worldview, and that can be explosive, especially at that time in life.
Yeah, and I myself, I graduated. I finished my graduate degree last year,
Oh.
and I can say that the college I went to was more of a commuter school.
Mhm.
There was some of the stuff that you feature present there, but it was kind of like Bush League by comparison. And not that I'm calling these people serious like thinkers, but it's kind of like these. There weren't a lot of people that permanently lived on the campus, so to some degree, you would see people going out there having their quote unquote protests, and then they drive home to whatever suburbs that were, and it was, it was really not serious. And I, for one, recognizing a lot of the traits that were for example, at Evergreen or at Yale
Mm.
or everything in the college that I went to. But I was like, well, I'm a STEM major, so
Mm.
I could just walk to my building and be amongst
Mm.
these Indians and Saudis and Iranians, and they don't even or other people that don't care about these topics. And it was virtually, like we had a world of our own that's mainly focused on getting into our careers,
Mhm.
and then we'd walk to the cafeteria or wherever the main student body was, and it was just a totally different world. Um, in the 4 years that you went to Evergreen State, did you see like a real tidal shift that caused what happened today, or is it kind of something that's been there the whole time, and we're just seeing it bubble to the surface due to external events?
Th- th- I think both are correct. I think that a lot of Evergreen, the humanities part of Evergreen, and humanities includes history, sociology, and then all the various, even media production and stuff. There's always been at Evergreen, historically, a strong social justice activism bent. And there's a very strong in the humanities, and I did pretty much all humanities at my time there, because that's what I'm interested in communication and in refining communication and pursuing excellence in communication and all the different forms of that. But there's always a framework of leftism, and these, I hope we can use these terms kind of loosely, because I think they shift a lot. But over the course of my time there, when I first got there, I encountered, kind of just young feminists learning that they have power over men and learning that men have power over them and needing to wrestle with that and other sorts of activist things. And I kind of just shrugged it off and figured out faculty that wouldn't cause me to operate within that rubric, where I could operate within the liberal Western tradition, as I think of it, of high art and fine art and higher literature and stuff like that. But I did see a marketed turn begin to happen over my time there with the young people and the way that the young people think and the way that the young people communicate. And then when Trump got elected, everything was turned up to 11 there. And that's when there was a couple protests before that, but that's when those protests started to gain momentum. And that's when the rhetoric of the far left teachers became more pronounced and everything became more urgent. And in a sense, in a sense, more urgent.
So let's talk about there. I think I have to agree with you that when I was taking, even though I was an engineering major, I had to take diversity courses,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them, I'll tell you, one of them was amazing. It was this Black Music of Two Worlds course. It was one of the best courses
You're breaking up. You're breaking up. I'm going to load a web page to see if
Can you hear me?
it's my internet. Okay. Yeah, I can hear you.
I think it's my internet.
Okay.
That was one of my fears. So we just have to like work through it. Yeah, I mean it's really I think I have to do a whole overhaul of my system. So I apologize, but I'm not George Stephanopoulos yet. So I'm
You'll
never
get
gonna.
there, man.
Yeah, who
You're an
knows?
engineer. You should have it
Yeah.
all rigged up.
Oh, absolutely. I'm getting a microphone by the way. I've been hearing a lot of complaints about the audio, so I've been doing all my videos now with this.
Excellent. Yeah, it sounds a lot crisper.
I did have one course that was amazing. That it focused on the music and it was taught by a white teacher, but I found it bizarre that the black kids who took the course, they weren't as engaged in it as a few of the white kids. There was another course, um, African American religion, that I had to take,
Mm-hmm.
taught by a guy who was a Marxist radical, a very opinionated guy, hated Christianity with a passion. He wasn't fond of other religions like Islam either,
Mm-hmm.
but he would say some of the most incendiary things. One of the things I remember him saying was that he thought Fidel Castro was one of the best world leaders because if people were unemployed, he'd take them out of the country and make them harvest sugarcane. So this is a guy who had, he had ample complaints about slavery in America, but he didn't see that as ironic statement. And then there was a third I saw. I had to take my freshman year called Diversity in Sports, and basically it was divided into one half of the semester was black athletes, the other half was women athletes. So that was diversity for you. And there was one day on disabled athletes. So too far into like my experience, is that kind of the way that all the courses are oriented at your college, or is there exceptions?
No, Evergreen as a whole is an exception. As a whole, there are no requirements to graduate other than credits.
Hmm.
So in order to get a BA, you don't have to take math, you don't have to take science, you don't have to take diversity, you don't have to take composition, though the courses are structured interdisciplinarily so that you encounter all these different things. And what you have is any given course is taught usually by a group of 2 to even up to 5 teachers. And then there are courses that are single teacher. But all those different teachers are from different disciplines. So probably the best class that I took there was called Dark Romantics. And what we did was we studied French literature, history, philosophy, and music and art in the 19th century during the Romantic period. And so we had a philosopher, we had a historian, we had an art major or art historian, and then we had a photographer, and we had language arts too. And they all met and they designed this course so that you're going through and you can specialize in what you want to specialize with that. But you're learning about this this one topic from all these different viewpoints, angles, yeah. And then in the spring we went to France and discovered the places that we'd been reading about. So it was a fully immersive program, and I learned French, and I was exposed to the history and the politics and all that stuff, all wrapped up into one. So, but there were some classes, and I did work on campus, and by working on campus and taking courses that would help me to work on campus, I did have to go through this anti-oppression training, or this diversity training, or this privilege training, or they always have a new name for it, which I think is interesting. I think it's very telling about this subset of academia, that they're always changing their language and they're always telling you what you can and can't say, and they're just futzing around with language, which on one level is can be impactful, but at the same time you're just figuring out different ways to censor other people, and just you're changing the game of language in a way. That's how I saw it. Like when one of my teachers, she would talk about history, and she would say, you know, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and everybody knows that gender is a construct, and then this happened, and then that happened, and then that happened. You're like, whoa, 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 hold on. You can't just say fact, 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 fact. Everybody knows that gender is a construct. Like, that's not a fact at all. What do you mean by everybody? What do you mean by gender? And what do you mean by construct? Like, I kind of basically understood what she was saying, but I thought that was very, very sneaky of her to do that. And so what I think with Evergreen is that when you go into these courses, you're really immersed and you become very close to the teacher, so that it's highly possible for the teacher to really embed their ideology into you. Or on the other hand, it's possible for you as a student to really embed yourself in a course of study. Like for the last year of my time at Evergreen, I was pretty much completely independent. I had small group work that I did, and I had a teacher that I met with every week. And I just wrote this big old fat novel, right? Where I took all my studies in literature and I tried to make the book that I've been wanting to make for,
Oh, nice.
for forever. I mean, it's not done, and I published it because I was into book arts and stuff like that. And that's another level that I was learning on it. So the thing is that for Evergreen, I think you really need to have self-motivation and a basic sense of self in order to understand when you're being led and when you're leading yourself. And I think Evergreen has become deficient in teaching communication skills and critical thinking skills. Instead of communication, they just teach you what you can and can't say. And instead of critical thinking, they teach you critical theory, or how to criticize Western culture. That's kind of what I saw with the trainings more and more and more. And then when I went back and started looking at it, I began to see a very definite arc where this ideology reached a sort of critical mass in the administration and in the faculty, where it became such a strong mass of thought and of correct thinking that whoever didn't fit inside of that bubble was silenced, and whoever spoke against that bubble was actively censured, with Brett Weinstein.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. I saw one of your videos and I was laughing almost hysterically. The one about the toxic masculinity, the poem that you were reading.
Oh,
it was
okay. Yeah.
it was one of, believe me, you could probably do. I'm not a person for poetry or theater, but I think you have that type of way of you're a literary person. Now I used to be into fiction writing too, but over the years I picked a profession where brass tacks and doing things like that. So unfortunately, I am seeing more and more this tendency. If you watch what's being produced, digital media, and even in literature, unoriginality that's tied to that culture of diversity, of political correctness, must be kind of handcuffing for somebody like you.
In a
break
sense,
molds instead of stay in them.
Yeah, well, I absolutely have to break a mold, because that's where my jollies come from, is discovering something new. And whether through wit or through experimentalism or through having ideas fight amongst themselves instead of being the champion of an idea, like letting one idea meet another idea and see what kind of thought babies they make, stuff like that. I'm very interested in procreation, I guess, I mean, I've been hanging out with Brett Weinstein, and so I'm thinking about evolution and how there's all these different systems that are filled with all this energy, and they're trying to refine and make more and more efficient versions of themselves. And I think that within the arts and literature and philosophy, and even in engineering, even in the hard sciences, like insofar as they're applicable and they're seeking new applications, seeking new theories. I think any sort of ideology that champions correctness on top of creation is it's abhorrent to me. I'd rather, like, correctness is subsequent or secondary to creation for me. So I would be in a class and somebody would say, you know, I don't think that a man is allowed to write a woman character, or a white person should write a black person, you know? And you're like, well, wait, why do we have an imagination? How dehumanizing is that? Like, who approaches art as that I have a certain box that I'm going to fill up with these certain thoughts? Like, no. Like, I approach art as though it's just a bucket of Legos. And I'm going to create whatever comes out of me and then see what holds and what doesn't hold, and play not with correctness, but play with people's ability to believe in what I'm producing, right? In their ability to pay attention and then receive either pleasure or pain through that which I create and express.
So yeah, I think, and I've turned off the camera because I'm getting a lot of info. I think this will improve the quality, but
okay, I use my hands too much.
Yeah, it's okay. I think it has more to do with my connection, but one of my favorite quotes of the past, you know, that I've discovered in the past year, it was in the '60s. He said it, but Czech director Milos Forman said that the worst type of censorship is self-censorship because it makes you lie to yourself about who you are. I'm paraphrasing, and I think that, you know, let's talk a little about that cultural issues and you know, the region you live in. You live in the Pacific Northwest. One of the when I was a kid, okay, and you strike me, you strike me, you know, correct me if I'm wrong. You strike me as more of a, you know, a liberal thinking person. Has you know, a live and let live philosophy, not going and you don't live according to doctrines. I mean, I could, you know, stop me at any time. When I was growing up, Pacific Northwest symbolized, I was at the time, you know, I was probably in my elementary school and then middle school, and there was Pearl Jam and all those bands and Soundgarden.
Yeah.
And being liberal was breaking the mold of conventional culture. And nowadays, I think we've lost that in terms of just music. I'm focusing on music, but you could probably
Okay. Interesting.
to the other arts, because you know, the values that I'm seeing on campuses and in places of art have already embraced all of those values of tolerance and diversity and you know, in some cases anti-religiosity. So it isn't groundbreaking anymore. You can have these points of view, and they basically fit in with the status quo. So you're an artist. Where do you see, like, frontier for people who, like you, you're looking to create original art, but you're not trying to do what has on the throats of students at Evergreen?
Yeah. Okay, you're gonna need to help me. So you've studied math, I assume.
Yeah.
So you said that I don't live according to a doctrine, and that's true. But I do.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a term in math. I don't think it's an algorithm. It might be, though. There's a certain sort of a set of rules that are generative. Do you know what I'm talking about? Or certain.
A proof?
It's a set of proofs, or a set of just basic game rules that produce certain activities or behaviors in the system. Does that make sense to you? I think there's a word for it. I always forget all these awesome science terms.
Yeah, that's what engineers do too. We forget, we we get into the industry and we forget the academic and theory part of
Yeah,
it.
right.
But yeah, there are laws. I mean, there are laws of geometry, for example, that are predicated on other laws, and then there are ones that are unprovable called axioms,
Mm.
recognized as being as
Guidelines. Right? I lost you. I'm going to wait until I hear you again. Axioms. Um, what are you doing?